architecture is something very personal, in particular architecture education, and that's why the first thing I would like to ask you, all the panelists, to introduce yourself and what is your connection to architecture education. In some cases, like Ma'am Chona, it's very obvious, the connection. But in other cases, we would also like to know what is your contact to architecture, because that is probably not by accident that you are sitting here in this panel. So can we start with Architect Ng?
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. As an introduction, our firm is primarily a design firm, and I think over the years we've discussed with architect William T, the organizer of this event, that we felt that the quality of the graduates have deteriorated over the years from the time we graduated not so long ago. And so we've done a few discussions on how we hope that the curriculum in the colleges would evolve, especially in this time of Facebook and Twitter. So, and also how the practice is evolving, especially with the new technologies that are coming up. So I guess it's...
Thank you very much. Architect Chona, what schools have you already been, where have you been teaching in? And then
I started in architecture education in 1994 from Far Eastern University, where, well, that was my first teaching job. And then later I transferred to University of Santo Tomas. But all throughout these years while I was teaching, and I was also working in an architectural firm. I was partner of Palafox Associates. I was partner of Dan Lichauco. So I've been teaching and also working. So I've seen the balance and I've seen the gap. So that's why I'm in architecture education.
That's why we don't have to share the mic. I teach in UST. Been teaching there for 16, 17 years, right? I also teach in NU, right? And been teaching there for 3 years, right? Right, Dean? And then basically I teach and practice part-time, but the teaching actually started all the way from grad school. So I was a teaching assistant at Notre Dame and a teaching assistant at Michigan. And then from there, I'll continue teaching and seeing basically the evolution of how teaching changed and how the students have changed.
We go to the foreign countries.
Yes, hi. I'm from Hong Kong and I've been teaching. I graduated in 2013, so I've technically taught for 4 years. I'm also working at a Shanghai firm called School Collaborative, and I've been doing this balance between sometimes doing teaching more, research more, and other times would be more focused on design practice. So for me, I'm still trying to work on a balance, and I'm hoping to get there sometime.
Hello, hi. So my name is Alex. My experience and how that relates to education, I started my practice as a student working with a local community in Tacloban. And that process, I learned a lot from the community. Later, I've tried to share that with other students as the visiting school director at the AA School of Architecture and also at the TNU in Norway. So basically, in all my projects, try to bring in students at one stage of the process where they get a chance to learn by doing. I think acting with the community and absorbing whatever knowledge they have. That's my approach, maybe my direction to the topic.
Thank you very much. Just a little bit about myself. I'm an architect and also a religious brother. We run the University of San Carlos. Society of Divine Word, SVD. And I arrived to the Philippines 10 years ago, and from that 6 years I was officer in charge of the Department of Architecture. That gave me a very, very direct exposure to that, how education can be organized. Now I am handling design subjects and theory of architecture, but since our congregation is the owner of the school, I am still very much connected with school management issues. So that's why I think I'm at least a little bit qualified to be here the host. So I tried to bring up questions which are not so much the details, but really rather the principles, so that everybody can use this. So architecture again is very personal, and we, in our teaching, we should be also personal. That's why maybe a next step would be, anybody of you who want, could you tell us something about your favorite teacher? Because a favorite teacher, we learn so much from our favorite teachers. So can you tell us something about a teacher that you really appreciate, from the teacher you learned so much? Also, the foreign colleagues, we would be very happy to, maybe we don't know that teacher because it's in China or in Norway, but you can explain what was the quality of that excellent teacher.
I'll start. In our early years in college, I think in our first or second year, we had a professor named Architect Inocencio. I haven't heard or seen him since. No, he had just come back from Dubai, I think, or a foreign posting, and he was very enthusiastic in teaching practical working drawings. I think he instilled in us a very good foundation. We haven't encountered another professor since who could explain how technical drawings are valuable communication tools between the architect and the builders. And I think it gave us a very strong foundation in our eventual practice.
My favorite teacher is not actually in the academy. After I graduated, I first worked with architect Julian Jordan. It was then that I realized that I didn't learn the necessary skills and knowledge that I need for the practice. So I learned it all from this architect. So he's also a graduate of NU eventually.
For people from USD, right? My favorite teacher, I had three actually. One was Cory Cruz, Yoli Reyes, who was the former dean of USD, and Bono Obra. We used to call him Bono. Don't tell me I said that. He calls him Bono. But these are the three teachers that actually I thought I learned a lot from. Why? Because from first year to fourth year, all my grades were really sucky, right? I had really bad grades. But I was going to school. I was making the podcast, right? And what happened was, all of a sudden, these three teachers started giving me really good grades. And the reason why I started getting really good grades was because I finally figured out what I was doing. And it's because of how they taught us and the things that we discussed. I finally decided that I could actually be good at this thing called architecture. But it came really late, right? And just a side note, I only won a competition when I joined the group and I gave them food and housing, right? So it was part of the fun of setting things up. But it's actually a good teacher will actually make you realize that you can actually do well or enjoy what you're doing and not just grind along.
Well, actually, I wanted to be a teacher before I wanted to be an architect. So to me, it's sort of different in the way that, in the sense that, to me, I've been fortunate enough to be inspired by teachers who are open enough. I think these are some of the qualities that teachers should have, not to really direct you, but more to inspire you in ways. In fact, Kun and Eunice are my teachers, so they have also been talking at the Anthology talks. So they, in a way, were instrumental also in my understanding of architecture, how it could be very social instigated, and of course, as well as other architects that I've been working with. Hong Kong is a place that's currently in this, there's a great attention to history, to heritage, what it means to the city. So I've also been working with architects that would have a very particular position about these things. So I think all these architects and teachers inspired me and formulated my way to being an architect / teacher.
My favorite teacher or maybe situation is I studied at this course called Art in Common Space. And what was nice there was that the teachers weren't teachers in the sense they were more the topics we would discuss, what we would be engaging in that course was something we explored together with the teacher. It was not like a teacher that was imposing his or her knowledge onto us as students. There was a curiosity amongst us students and responsibility amongst us students to collectively, with the teacher, explore a topic that neither of us really knows that much about. Now, that is something that has been really important for me when I practice, because that idea of whoever you are, whatever you're really looking at, if the interest is there, you can really learn together. And that's what that course enabled me to do, basically. So that's my preference.
So thank you very much. Now we can go to the deep and really sometimes even controversial issues. The first is actually the outcome. Because we say we are into outcome-based education. So whatever we do, we want to see what is the harvest, what is the fruit out of this. And in the school, very long time, we did not look at that. We were just teaching. And then, now, this is the question. What kind of architect would you like to see in your offices or in the other places in the society? Architects, what are the important character features and knowledge of for those architects that we want to see? And this is the final orientation for the school, because we should produce architects like that. I would be really even encouraged that you hear an opinion, you can even answer directly to the other panelists. So there is no need always that I finish the round. So it would be very interesting to see from your different points of view, from your apprentices, all kind of, what kind of architects we would expect from the education.
Sorry, I'm in the middle, so I'll start. So I think it's that end, middle, that end, and then the two sides, right? Here in my office, basically and even in school, it's very different. My mindset is very different. I will assume you're smart until you prove to me you're not. Then we'll figure out what we can do after that, no? Which is very different from assuming that you know nothing, and then from there, or you're not smart, and then you know nothing, and then we'll have to teach you. It's reverse. And so in the office and the types of architects we're looking for, our number one rule in the office is you have to be very comfortable with what you do not know, period. Because if you don't know something, you have two choices. You can fake it and pretend you know it, or you can say, wait a minute, I don't know it, i-Google natin, right? And those are the second one is what we're looking for. One of the things I find when I teach in UST and NU, more in UST than NU, is that I spend a lot of time with my students telling them, stop lying to me, right? In other words, the first response of a student is to make up some funky story, right? And say, as opposed to just say, I don't know, right? And so sometimes on a single point, it'll take me 20 minutes to figure out, to prove to them that they're wrong. And they say, just stop lying, and just say, I don't know, I didn't consider that. And those are the kinds of students we would like to see. Is if you're comfortable with what you don't know, then you know that you have to look for the information, and from there we can teach you how to look for the information.
Well, the first thing I look for when somebody comes in and applies for a job is penmanship. If somebody has bad penmanship, then forget it.
I won't get hired.
No, but kidding aside, the first thing you usually look for is enthusiasm. So if somebody is enthusiastic, they're normally quick on their feet. So they pick up quickly, and they really they're like sponges. They absorb information very quickly. Also, we look for somebody who has a very good command of language. Again, we see architecture. There are a lot of problems we see with other. We hear a lot of problems in the industry that is caused by poor communication. So whether it be in drawings or in verbal or in letters, most of the misunderstandings are caused by poor communication. So I think this something that's often overlooked in the school curriculum. So for the students here, I think I would recommend that you start practicing by talking to yourself. When you do your designs, it's like you are your own client, and then if you can convince yourself with your design, then probably you're getting somewhere.
It's also the same. Copying ka eh, you saw my notes. Okay, it's communication, but not just verbal communication. I always told our staff before that the clients will notice the person who is presenting the project verbally. But in the office and even in school, it's important that you verbalize or you communicate your idea, whether on paper, in drawing, or verbal or written. So the clients or your teachers will never know what your idea is until you have communicated it to them. And also, I look at students or even staff before who are self-starters, meaning if they finish their job, they won't just sit there and wait for the immediate boss to tell him what to do. But he will go around and then ask other people if they need help or if they need help in research or in drawing, etc. So basically, those are just the two that I'm looking for.
Well, I think right now the panel mostly was talking about more, I guess, personal, like occupational aspects of it. Makes me wonder if there's a difference between how academia thinks about what architect students should be versus what the practice, the general practice is looking for. Because I think we find this schism in Hong Kong. In a way, at least for HKU, we're trying to inspire students to really think about society, to think about issues that pertain to what it means to be in Hong Kong, in China. We have mass urbanization, we have heritage that are being torn down by local developers, and in a way we're trying to set this as the school as some kind of front for some engagement to happen, whereas the practice has always been sided as to see the school as more vocational training section. So issues about communication, like being self-motivated for work is important, but at the same time, we feel that this has been a struggle in between. So, I mean, this is my thought as well as a question to the panel as well.
So I just took note of this, what you mentioned, subject, and then one some psychological attitude. So don't lie about your shortcomings. That's and then enthusiasm. This is psychological training. So how an architect should be. But in our schools, we neglect the psychological preparation because there are drawings, plates, so many plates, and then day and night, and then this psychological preparation is somewhat missing. Another thing what I noticed, penmanship, communication is very important. But where is that subject? So we tried in some colors to introduce architecture communication as a elective subject, but it's not in the CHED curriculum. So I am actually really surprised because we have so many subjects in the curriculum and none of them were mentioned by you. Design, building technology, professional practice, plan, all these subjects. And when I asked you, I'm a bit provocative, but none of those subjects were mentioned by you. Communication and psychological maturity. So. Can I drill a little bit more so that please tell us subjects, and then how would you like to see those subjects? The apprentices and then the young architects who come to your office, architect Lichauco.
I think, sorry, let me jump into that. First of all, I said, be very comfortable in what you don't know, and when you don't know, look for it. That's in all your courses. That's in design. If I don't know the appropriate stair width, do I just offset some funky number and say tapos na? Why do I look it up, right? If I don't know how big a generator has to be, do I fake it or do I look it up? My favorite in both NU and USD, future expansion, open to below, and AHU, right? You're doing AHUs, you don't even know the size of your AHUs, right? And so all of that comes in, it's words that you see in all the plans. There's always an open to below, there's always a future expansion, unassigned space. In others, I don't know what to put there, right? And then there's always basically the AHU. Now, if you want to do the work properly, once you're drawing, you can continue drawing, that's design. You can continue sketching, that's design. But if you don't know the parts, if you don't know what you want the building to be, you're either guessing or you can stop and look it up, right? And I think one of the things we're looking at is stop muna, look it up, so that you're not faking it. And that really comes in with saying, I don't know what I'm doing. I can either ask or I can fake it. That's in history, that's in research, that's in design, that's in building technology, and that's in basically everything that you do in life. Even dating, diba? I don't know what she really does. So you can either look it up and ask her friends, diba? Stuff like that. So in other words, you gotta do the research before you continue.
I think I expect further answers because it would be also interesting to hear regarding the subjects because we are teachers, we want to teach so that the outcome will be better. Something like this, I would like, highly appreciating this maturity that we heard, but know about the content also.
Unfortunately, in the Philippine setting, the curriculum is set by the Commission on Higher Education. And we found out that not even the PRBOA, the Professional Regulations Board of Architecture, was consulted in the crafting of the curriculum. And until now, what we're using in the universities is the CHED memo, which was done in 2006. So there was no updated guidelines or curriculum. Unless, of course, you are deregulated like UP, wherein you can do your own curriculum. But so many schools, or majority of the schools in the Philippines, are not deregulated. So we have to follow the CHED guidelines, which is why I'm not talking about the curriculum per se, because it's given. All the students must pass their subjects. And we cannot overdo a subject because we want our students to be doing very well in design. So let's push design as the main subject. We want the graduates to be a total architect. Even the board exams, when they will take the board exams, there's the diversified training book wherein they have to finish all of these areas before they apply for the board exams. Um, so I was talking more about the hidden curriculum, that which is not implied, that which is not obvious. That's why I said communication, and then because if you have all of these things, it will make you a successful person. Just knowing the design will not make you a successful architect. Just knowing the building tech, the building utilities does not guarantee a good practice. But if you have this other traits, which I think for me, the hidden curriculum is more important than the implied curriculum.
I think to continue with what Dean Chona said, the problem with the architecture education in general, okay, is that what makes a good school, diba? It's how many people top the board, how many people pass, what is the passing rate. Some schools have one person taking it, one person passing rate nila 100%, right? So in other words, it's right. It's pretty much basically what Ched has done. And so when you start teaching design, and everybody has been taught this, I was taught this, I guess you were taught this, you draw a floor plan, you elevate the walls, and you come up with exterior. Maybe in Hong Kong, they would start talking about, let's start from the exterior, which is totally not done here, right? And one of the things about design is you're right, there should be this mix now between the practicality of architecture and the theory and the whole academic point of architecture. But if you ask yourselves and ask your teachers from all the schools, right, how many of your teachers actually critique your elevations? How many people critique your perspectives? They don't even see your perspectives till 2 hours before when you print it, submit it, and you smell bad because you didn't take a bath, right? So it doesn't really happen. And so one of the things that can change is actually turning the whole design process around, and which I've done in certain classes, and I'll tell them, you start from a perspective. Let's talk about that, then you make your plans. But then because the whole education system has been ingrained with this process of plan first, everything else, then you're kind of stuck with that system, which ties up with the CHED rules and the CHED regulations. Maybe in Hong Kong they might do it differently. Maybe they started a model, right?
I don't know what we start with. We start with some kind of okay, I know what we start with. We start with always an analysis of a certain thematic. So I think in that regard, from what I hear so far, it feels very different. In Philippines, it seems that the training is really much for a building that works. Whereas in Hong Kong, I think we're starting to move slightly further away from that, in that we're really trying to see what the issues are, whether it's conservation, adaptive reuse, whether it's an idea about sustainability, or whether it's to create a high-rise that allows for good ventilations, or even fabrication methods. We're still I think we're still demanding that the architecture student has those basic knowledge of like communication, self-sufficient. Like you can go and find standards yourself, but we're really moving further from that to dealing with other issues that is more urgent in the city.
Compare my Norwegian education as opposed to the AA in London. I mean, the Norwegian one is about learning the tools to be an architect, the technical drawings methods, and how to make a section, how to make an elevation, this. But at the AA, the difference there is that we learn how to think architecture. And that's where the communication comes in. That's where how to be a human, actually communicating with another person with a different perspective, and actually thinking and talking about architecture. I think the balance there is interesting. That's also the international, how you position yourself in society, and the way of thinking about society through the tools that you receive in thinking architecture. So that's, I'm adding to that.
Yeah, so, well, I guess it's also the reason why I'm more interested in history and theory, so I teach more of that classes in the way that it allows oneself to think more about what architecture can mean, instead of simply to say that this architecture is built correctly or it's proportionally acceptable. Because what is proportion after all? It's also based on a certain issue. Maybe it was aesthetical proportions, but now it can be of other dimensions.
Maybe quick story, and I think it's a great comparison. I went to UST, graduated 86, right? I'm 53, although I look 22, right? But anyway, this is what happened. I get to school, I get to Michigan, and then I start doing this theory of architecture class, and I go, Michael who? Peter who? Zaha what? Right? In other words, when we went to school, we weren't exposed to that. Okay, so I had to catch up with the theoretical kind of thinking how the building should be and everything. But then when I got there, they go, wait, galing your drafting, your skills are fantastic, right? And that's what we got from UST. What is interesting is that if you look at the different schools, and then this is coming up, and I'm not sure about San Carlos because I've not been invited to lecture there yet, but that's an open, I'm asking myself to invite myself there, right? But here's the thing, the 4 big schools, one of them does not have an architecture program, right? Of the 3, I have this running joke, I won't tell you which one, right? One school teaches you how to design it and to write about it. The other school teaches you how to design it and build it. And the other school teaches you how to talk about it, right? But then if you look at all of these 3 schools, they are doing things that are different in the realm of the architecture profession. Yes, you have to write about it. Yes, you have to talk about it. Yes, you have to be able to design it. And yes, you have to build it. What is coming out today is as each program begins to look at the specificity of where they're going, right, you'll see that there are certain changes in the whole academic kind of overview, right? But what's interesting also, and I'm looking at this from backseat, is that sometimes they all go back to the basics, which is the UST model, the MU model, which is the everything else. But what's interesting again is that there is this big shift, right? And so depending on the school now that you go to, and depending on the thrust of what the dean, and the dean says a lot on where they want to bring their students, that's where the education actually begins to change. So if you want to change, then get all the deans together, right, and come up with not a uniform curriculum, but a curriculum wherein all the schools maybe can cover all the different parts, and each school now can be known for a certain thing and be the best of that part.
So we came to the important part, the coverage, what is covered in the school. So I would like to ask you also, are you satisfied with the knowledge, factual knowledge of the students who come to your office? I just would like to give you an example. So for example, I am a building technology teacher. What should I teach? Should I teach that what is here, or should I teach what is coming, or should I teach the constructions which will be here in 20 years? For example, if I am teaching that only what has been always taught, no, then I am not preparing my students for the future. If I go to the construction fair, I collect all the information, I am teaching it, then it can be that it is not feasible because it can be maybe an erroneous structure, no? Because something what is new, you don't know what is the future. But then you want to teach the principles in order to prepare your students for that what will come in 10 years, 15 years. So if you teach only the old things which are sure, you send the apprentice there, the architect will accuse you did not teach the new things. You teach that what is current, you might be accused that you don't teach that what is really correct, because you don't know, maybe that structure will not be correct in that principle. And if you just teach the principles, you will be accused that the student doesn't know anything because only just the principles. So I would like to hear from you the coverage, so that then the knowledge of the students, factual knowledge, when they go to your office, you see them in the school, is it enough or should we add something?
It's a wrong question in a way that I don't think the burden of responsibility of covering everything in the same detail should lie on the teacher, because I mean, even what we talked so far about, like,
in other words, if you understand that you have to look for stuff, then it will allow you to just progress. And again, it's part of that teaching this ability for people to say, time out, let's look for the information muna. And huwag na tayo magbolahan, let's stop fooling each other because you're only fooling yourself.
What are the most useful subjects in your practice? Most
Lunch.
useful.
Recess. Sorry, I teach also, we also build schools, and a lot of the learning is actually done outside the class. If you ask yourselves, did you learn more from your classmates or from your teacher? A lot of you learn more from your classmates. A lot of you learn from the research that your classmate was doing, and you just copied it, right? But you learned also, right? And a lot of the learning, when we do campuses, a lot of the learning is done outside the school. I remember when I left UST, 1986 again, I took the board exam. I failed it. Yes, I failed the board exam, right? And I took it a second time. Buti lang I passed, right? And so what happened was, I said, wow, when I left architecture school, this is all I know, right? And then I go to grad school and I go, wow, there's so much I don't know, right? And then when I came back, I go, wow, people think that if I have a grad degree from the US, I knew everything I was talking about. My thought bubble was, why the hell are they believing me? I never built anything, right? But then all of this comes through. And so what happens is, in terms of that, I lost my thought. It's all training, it's all teaching, but it's basically understanding this, that it's knowing where to get stuff and knowing what to look for and knowing who to ask and knowing who to believe. Right? And I've seen that also in the practice. I just came, sorry, I'm talking too much, but this is kind of cute. How many here realize why the setup of ordering food in Greenwich Pizza is different from the setup in ordering food in Jollibee? Right? You guys go to Greenwich, right? You guys go to Jollibee. But did you ever ask yourself, why is the counter in Greenwich different from the counter in Jollibee? I won't answer that, but think about it. And that's the kind of people we want. You know, it's like you walk in, you experience something different, go, why is this different? Right? And so therefore, what went right and what was the cause of this difference? And that basically makes you a more curious, a proactive architect and designer.
So subjects like
Jollibee and eating.
What about history of architecture? Is that subject has an importance in your practice?
We did a mosque in Cotabato, and 100% of the team that designed the mosque are not Muslims. But the clients were so impressed because we knew all the parts of the mosque. So they said, so how did you know? Did you go to a mosque? No. It was taught to us in history class. So it pays also to pay attention to this stuff because when you talk to your clients, they think that you're so clever, you know everything. But actually, wala na ba si Robert Mirafuente? Architect Mirafuente, who is a member of the PR BOA, said that in the Middle East, most of the board takers are actually have been practicing for a long time. So they've been out of school for a long time. They practiced in the Middle East, and then they wanted to take the boards. Unfortunately, they already forgot their history of architecture. So a lot of them failed the exam. In fact, only 20% passed that subject in the board exam. Hence, only 20% passed the board exam as a whole in the Middle East because of the history of architecture. So for the students, if you think that it's a useless subject, it's not. Because you will not pass your board exam if you did not study. Diyan pa pala si Robert eh. If you did not study your history. Agree, Robert?
And for the record, I failed history the first time I failed the board exam. Right? And so what happened after my first teaching in UST, I actually ended up teaching history. And history is very important because it allows you to understand what happens, what happened before, and to understand why the changes. A lot of the things I tell my students is, or at least for me, is for me to understand finally what the modernists did and what Zaha did, right, and everybody else. Is going back to the classics, going back to the history and see how it actually shifted the way of thought. But the bottom line is this: if you study history, then you can have really good dates. So I just take your date to the post office and say, wow, check out the lesbian leaf and the goutte and the triangles are fantastic. Shota na kayo after that, I can guarantee you.
So you guys have history as one of the exams for.
Yes, and I failed it.
Okay, because
Yeah, because I
don't.
couldn't name Parian Gate. No, I'm serious. They said one of the quiz was the 5 gates of Intramuros, and I think I forgot this gate. Right?
The fact is we don't have history as a professional exam. Most of our subjects are contract management, structures, building design, like building code and stuff. So it comes to show how practical minded, typical Hong Kong people can be, where I'm sort of the outlier, I guess, in a way. So yeah, but it really comes to, I guess at least Philippines value history in some way that it's not existent in other places, I guess.
The best thing if you history, go to Rome and say, I sat on Michelangelo.
What about Norway?
In terms of history. Well, yeah, we had to do the course, and we kind of had to pass it. So many points. I think no. In terms of the topic, I think actually the A history was a discussion we would have once a week addressing architectural theory, not necessarily the objects or the buildings that have been built, but what has been thought about it before. And that within that you can contextualize yourself as a student. What is it that really interests you, and what is that you kind of want to, so you don't need to know the specific gates, right? Huh? Yeah, so technically I think we had some kind of history education in Norway, and it wasn't very useful for me. But AA was more about learning how to learn, in a sense, about what I find interesting in history. And actually working in the Philippines, it's fantastic history that exists there. In practice, I'm learning about.
No, but history is actually interesting. Example, we talk about the Parian Gate, right? And the Parian Gate was basically the gateway that got into the old Chinatown. That's why it's called the Parian Gate. See, I learned that, right? But then when you think about it, it's a lot of curiosity of just everything that you see every day. You guys know the term pa-arbor? I just learned it the other day. Pa-arbor, right? You know where that came from? Arbor was apparently the term for marijuana, right? And so when you say pa-arbor, can I have marijuana? Right? So can I have that? That was basically what was done in the 70s, right? And so again, that whole historical context just makes things interesting and makes things really fun. Where did Chota come from, right? I'm not going to tell you that because it's not really cool, but look it up. But then a lot of things historically will tell you, and it sounds really corny that if you don't know where you came from, you don't know where you're going, Jose Rizal, right? History is still important because it will tell you what they did wrong, what they did right, what are the processes, what did they think about, why did this come up, how did this happen, and you can apply that to everything else down the road. And I'm a big fan of history. Channel 63 in Sky Cable. 65.
Actually, when I arrived here, I was also assigned to teach history, and I was shocked that the students don't like this subject, because in our country, history was really a highly appreciated subject, because you want to be an architect, you want to design beautiful buildings. So you are interested in the existing beautiful buildings, how they are. And then I noticed it was a hated subject, because probably some teachers are really very strict, and then students think it's just to memorize. And it was very tough for me to bring this subject in a lovable way, although it is a hated subject.
To make it lovable, either add violence or sex. It's easy, right? Example, no? You know that the Doric column has no base. You all know that, right? Okay, there's no base because they would cut the feet of the prisoners, right, so that they couldn't run, and the columns were supposed to be representative of prisoners, violence, cells, right? So in other words, they said that, we'll remember, and a lot of it makes it really interesting. So it's violence and sex, okay? But most of the time it's just fun, okay? I can't say wala sex, my team's here.
I guess the that the history that makes most sense to students would be the history that is most relevant to them in the way that it's of their current generation or past. I mean, the history that I have been taught the first year, I didn't have any clue of what they're talking about. But then once I got into second year, the history was more recent to where I am now in relation. We were talking about Second World War or post-war development. So I think to build up a sense of history is really to understand yourself in relation to society. And I guess especially for Hong Kong and Asian cities, we tend to forget, history tends to be forgotten, whether by government or by institutional apathy. That it's not the same in European conditions where history has been this much more continuous flow. Because it ultimately depends on state and power and politics as well. So you tend to have moments where you forget history as well.
So I was checking what you were talking about this. I noticed there are two kind of things. One is skills and one is knowledge. Because the history is really a knowledge. You have to learn this. But you have to interpret to those after that you get an analytic thinking. But what about the skills for designing? How do we learn this? I just think that knowledge can be get from books, but skills can be get from mentors. So what is the role of mentors in architecture education? Mentors.
Right now, what is being done in schools is they demonstrate how to do it, and then they will imitate. It's more of, it should have been a mentor and an inspiration. In college, dapat talaga, what the faculty should do is that they should really be mentors, not teachers, not tell the students, oh, you do this, you do that, but they should inspire the students and show them this is how, just the basic steps on how to do things, but not the step 1, you do this, step 2, not really the step-by-step instructions. But the students are very visual. Just show them a picture. Okay, these are the projects that are similar to what you're doing. Usually they would just look at the pictures and they get it already. Instead of saying so many things, but they will still look blank at you because they do not understand what you're talking about.
I think, well, we have 40-person classes. You have 12 people in your design studio, right? And you're 17 in a class. We have 40 or 50 people in a section. So it's kind of hard to mentor. So you guys do the shotgun mentor approach, right? But then one of the things that happens is this, and this is, again, history and interesting. You know that how you would work for Corbusier? He would actually come in and say, okay, you want to apply in my company? Come draw a horse, right? And if you say, what? My horse is really sucky, I can't draw a horse. You leave. But you stayed and drew a horse no matter how ugly your horse was. He would talk to you, right? And so therefore, that's the whole idea of basically understanding that part of the whole mentoring process is also teaching them to have the attitude, di ba? Yung may K, may karapatan, di ba? So may K to get this done, maski na it's fake K or something that's real K. But the whole idea of mentoring is just either one is telling them, yes, you're good at this and you can actually do this, or sometimes mentoring can also say, you might not be good at this, right? Which gives you to this other kind of schism wherein when I teach, I cannot really tell a student he's not good because how do I know that's not going to be the next Zaha, right? How do I know at one point in time some light bulb is going to open and say, wow, they're good, but it might be when they're 40, when they're 50, you'll never know, right? And historically, you will also never know because if you look at how great architects actually, at what age they became really good, the ages vary. So the idea of, I call it the shotgun approach to mentoring, and I think most of your students are here, I think as teachers, we will give you as much as you ask. But if you don't ask, we're not going to give you anything. right? And so therefore, the shotgun approach to mentoring is the more interest you show, the more work you show, the more times you call and ask questions, everything else shows us that there's actually the drive, the idea that you want to be good at what you want to do. And I'd like to tell most of your students, right? Teachers, although even your worst, lousiest teacher will know when you're lying and you're just making papel to ask a question to get a good grade. Believe me, all teachers know that, right? And 95% of the time, the questions are just papel questions, right? And so think about that and think about how we are here to mentor you or to help you, but also think of the limitations of class sizes, limitations of the fact that I have to talk to 50 people in 4 hours, right? But I'm actually only there 30 minutes, right? So, right, Dean?
So how is mentoring in Norway?
Well, actually, I have a mentor now. He was fantastic. He basically just told me, if this is what you want to do, make sure to look at these things and then do it. Actually, I think that's kind of the value of a mentor, is that there is someone there to actually listen to you, to see what you do, to take a stance if they have an opinion, but that's it. The rest is up to you. You have to kind of do it. So, yeah. Well, this mentor taught me, what was it? It's not what you do, it's how you do it. And that's kind of stuck with me for a period of now. So, yeah.
I feel that there are two types. So one type would be those who are really open-minded, in that you make a decision and they would say, "Oh, it's a good idea," or maybe, or some suggestions to help you move forward. The other type is more instructional, in that they have a very strong idea of what architecture should be, and they will use that studio to teach you that. You have to follow all their rules, like all corners must be filleted or whatnot. So, but I think at the end, it comes down to you to decide whether that method is good for you or not, and what you can get out of it. As in, you may disagree with the skills that he presented you with, but it's up to you to decide how you want to make use of it, since you already spent the semester learning those skills. And honestly, through my 5 years of education, some of the skills I learned, I haven't used it before once, after once. So, and I don't think it makes me a less architect at all. So, it really comes to your self-identity and how you take things in your stride.
I think the easiest way is to give them responsibility. So let's say you have a design plate, and then you ask the student, "Oh, you're going to design a museum. It's your responsibility to do the research. Go to the site, and then you research the access points, you research the heights, the elevations, and whatever. Eventually, if they do good, fine. If they make a mistake, maybe even better, because they will learn from them. And then eventually it will build character. So we'll produce students who are not cookie cutter graduates, but architects who really can deliver."
There's this really galing quote from this really famous architect. He said, "Experience is the best teacher of design. The more you see, know, and understand, the better your designs will be. But you should be able to differentiate between good and bad." The really galing architect was me, by the way. It's in my Facebook. Right? But it's basically that. It's look, how many of you entered the Peninsula lobby and say, "Do I like this? Do I not like this? Why is it nice? Why is it banging?" Right? Have you entered Mega Mall and say, "What did they do with this bridge here?" And did you enter a bathroom and say, "Why is this way? And why is there a little fly in the urinal, in the urinals in the bathrooms?" Right? So in other words, every time you walk into a place and you make a habit of saying, "What do I feel? Do I like this? Do I not like this? Why do I like this? Why did they do it?" And you start guessing, it actually exercises your mind. And therefore, experience with asking and experience with wonder is actually the best design teacher. Right? The hard part is telling what is good and bad, right? And that's, I think, one of the difficulties in the architect profession. Architects have this code of ethics that we cannot criticize or critique, not criticize everybody else's work. So how do we tell students, how do you know this example is a good example and that example is a bad example? And most of the time you're copying really bad examples, right? And so experience is actually that, an experience in saying, what do I know, what do I feel, what can I do to make this better? Did the architect make the good decision or bad decision? Without putting down the work, but understand that this basic simple tenet, and this is what I tell my clients, the problem with showing perspectives is our clients do not know exactly the amount of genius behind that picture. They'll say, "Ooh, what a nice picture," but they don't understand the little details that you guys stressed about. We have to do this size window and all the reasons why your perspectives became that way. Take out the deadline problems. And so clients never understand the genius behind a single picture. And so what happens is architects, you should be able to understand the genius behind every single line that you see. The genius behind every choice that the draftsman put on paper, that the builder put on the wall, right? That the designer put on his 3D model. And all of that have reasons, and also there's a genius behind that. And your skill is to be able to understand that there is genius behind every single line that you see.
Can we know at this juncture, as the audience, what kind of mentorship would you wish? Because it's very interesting here, the teachers are talking and then the architects, but what about you? Could you raise your hand if what kind of mentors would you like? Can we ask the gentleman here in the red t-shirt? Yeah? Because you seem to be very interested. Question was, what kind of mentors would you like to have? What are your expectations in mentoring?
What mentor I want to have is like a mentor that inspires students to push more and not instructs only do that, do this, and we can only meet after the deadline and just grade it. What I want is a mentor that always inspires students about issues about our society, our community, and that's all.
Can I just say this, sorry? You have to understand that just like all of you and all your friends have different personalities, all the teachers and all your mentors have different ways and personalities of mentoring. One teacher going to go, oh, it's a good solution, but I think it would be better to go that direction. That's one kind of mentor. The other kind of mentor, which is more like me, it's like, wow, that's really pangit, why don't you change it? Alright, simple, straight to the point. And when you come back and say, why is that pangit? Then we'll start explaining, right? And so in other words, go beyond the personality and understand the message, right? And the message is, this is how we can make your work better. So take away from the personality. How many times you said, ay, kaibigan ko yung teacher na yan. The teacher's my friend, but he failed me. What a snake in the grass. You've heard all of that, right? But then, is it because you're friends and we're supposed to give you a good grade? Or it's because it's actually what we're teaching? And you should be able to differentiate, just like we differentiate the capabilities of each student, you should also begin to differentiate the personalities of the mentors and the teachers and go beyond the personality and say, are they doing something really cool or not? Right? My favorite thing is, sir, can I take a look at one story, USC thesis, right? Some guy wanted to consult me, I look at his work, and I look at it for 5 seconds. And I said, yeah, it's fine. Okay, and he came back to me, he goes, sir, but you only looked at that for 5 seconds. And I go, well, this is what's good about your project. I started naming a lot of things. And I said, oh, by the way, you can fix this, and this, but you won't fail because of that. They don't understand that it's the training that we can look at it in 5 seconds and say, it's good or bad, which gives you up to my other historical story, my Picasso story. Picasso is in a cafe, a girl comes up, recognizes Picasso and says, oh, Mr. Picasso, can you sign my napkin? So he signs a napkin. And then he goes, oh, can you make a little drawing? And then so Picasso makes a little drawing, so that'll be 50 francs, right? And the girl goes, why 50 francs? It only took you 10 seconds to do this. And he goes, yeah, 10 seconds to do this, but 50 years to learn how to do it in 10 seconds, right? And that's basically your teachers, right? We've been doing it so many times that we can look at it and say, wow, it took it for 5 seconds. But then we're not here, but sometimes we know what we're doing. Not all the time, but sometimes we know what we're doing.
Can we afford one more inspiration from the group? Yes.
Hello. I just want to share something about how ERC Board of Architecture is doing the exams. Unlike before, everything is by definition, and you're supposed to identify objects or items or things, right? So we are doing, we're getting away from that and more concentrating on outcome based, outcome based. So to be able to answer many of the exam questions, that means there are a lot of it's very important for the examinees to be able to think critically, because most of them are situational questions. So to address, to be able to think critically, that means it's very important that in educating future architects, should be in a way that they should be able to decipher things on their own, and to be able to decide what is good and what is bad. And for example, like we were talking about subjects earlier, right? And we mentioned you have subjects like structural. Is there a subject structural? And I think the way they teach here locally is to compute how many bars, rebars, and all those. And in actual practice, you don't do that as an architect. You actually hire a structural engineer to do that, right? So what's more important is to let students understand concepts, right? Not the abstracting, not the ABCD, but not the numbers 1 + 1 = 2. It's more something like 3 + 4 can be 10, can be 20. You know, we are in creative industry, and we need to address that in terms of how we see things differently from the others. For example, structure. We can talk about tension and compression. That's all you teach, tension and compression. By the end of the course, students should understand what makes a structure under tension and under compression, not the computation itself. And by doing that, they will be more, they can address more of the design aspect. The same thing with history, right? Of course, beyond understanding the parts and all those, probably what's more important is that why these designers in the past create this kind of space. What can light do? Direct, indirect, reflected, diffuse lighting can do in terms of privacy, hierarchy, order, and all those like. So it's something like that. So more on the idea that they should be trained to be critical thinkers in the end. I think that should be the goal of architecture teaching.
Thank you very much.
Can I just say, if you wrote the board exam and I took it, I would have passed once.
I did, because my board exam only started last year.
If you wrote it when I took the exam, I wouldn't have failed the first time.
I would just say that this is what we did not mention as outcome, that our graduates will pass the board exam, and then the board exam changed really a lot, and there are some schools who are surprised that the board exam changed, and why is the passing grade average is different, because the board exam did change. So now this will be the second part of our conversation, which is more or less 2 hours. So we will learn about this, what we can do in the Philippine architecture education to solve all these problems, and then to promote all these purposes, the objectives that we mentioned. First of all, one of the important things is the class size. Because when I studied architecture in Hungary, our group was between 20 and 22 people, and we had 2 teachers. And then it was so in the design class, archist, it was so that the professor who had the degree, maybe doctoral degree, on that particular period, he gave the lecture to the whole year level. And then we went to the studios to practice to draw the details. And then here, it's in San Carlos, there are around 35 students in studio class. That's, we don't want to put more than 35, but sometimes it is even more than 35. And in the other class, 45. And so I would like to ask for your proposals, suggestions, how could we diminish this tension? Because the class size is simply too big. What are your suggestions?
I think understand the class first. Now, I'll give you an example. This is true story. When I first started teaching in USC, I actually taught history, and I had slides. You know what those things are? Those little white things with a projector. No, they're called slides. Okay, we were using slides and everything, and I prepare and everything. But I had to give the same lecture to 40 people 3 times a day, 3 times a week, right? And then one day I said, why don't I just combine all the classes? And so we got the auditorium, right? And then we combined, so I started doing the same lecture for 120 people. It was efficient, it was actually more fun, right? But then the school thought that I was cheating on the salary they were paying me, because instead of teaching it 3 times, I was teaching it only once. So they stopped doing a 120 class size for history. And that's where I think the schools have to be flexible in terms of class sizes. If it's a subject that is repetitive and it's hard on the teacher to repeat, and the teacher would be more effective doing it once than doing it the 3rd time the same day, then what happens is you're actually a more effective teacher. But in design where it's a one-to-one crit, the slower 12, I'm jealous of your 12 class size, right? 12 to 20, right, is actually something that will make it easier because now you can interact and actually spend more time.
Just to react to this, when I was officer in charge in San Carlos, I wanted to introduce this because really it's a very advantageous practice. Somebody gives the lecture who is knowledgeable, unlike the other one who is not knowledgeable. And then it's only once the students are there. We have big rooms in San Carlos, so we could have also done. So there was a subject plan, that is urban planning, urban design, maybe you know that subject. So we got a professor with PhD degree from foreign country, Cebuano, retired, came to us to teach. So I appointed him as head teacher. So he will give the lecture to everybody in the Safad theater. So all will go there. He will give, after that they go to the studios, to the classrooms. What happened? We had to stop because once this professor came to me, I don't know why, but my colleagues look at me in a strange way. And then turned out that the other teachers did not like that he is now the boss. But I said, you have the doctorate degree, you have the experience, you have international contacts, you were teaching in other places. You have the capacity to teach this student. And then once it happened that a classroom teacher, wrote a complaint against the professor, he said, this old teacher came to my classroom and he was sitting there. So I said, what is the problem? This teacher is just want to coordinate with you. You should be happy that somebody is experienced, has the degree, has the experience, has the contacts, would help you. So I think this kind of democratic understanding is a little bit problem because teaching is not really a democratic process because you have the knowledge or you don't have the knowledge. So what do you think about this? Could we make this, the knowledge of those who are more knowledgeable, more accessible to more students?
I disagree. And I don't know if, I mean, obviously my tutors have more experience. But it's not a discussion. And the size of classes depends what for. What is it for? What is
We could reduce the number of that the lecture is given by one person, but the exercise is the training. For example, in Archist, the lecture that you teach what happened in that period, that is given by one for everybody. And then when you draw those details, that is done in separate classrooms, in small groups. So this is one of the suggestions, and I am proposing this to you, and I'm listening to what do you think?
I feel that every method of teaching like construction would have its pros and cons. I'll just share with you what we are currently doing. We have this Common Core course, which is, by class size is 120, like 100 to 120 people. And what happens is that although we have lectures, we found that lectures are not always the most direct way to get student feedback, because students, you be on a lecture, it's hard to know if the students get it or not. So what happens is we hired TAs to also conduct tutorials to engage the students more directly. And I think in that regard, it has helped in some ways, both on the student side where they get more contact hours without bearing too much pressure on the lead teacher, professorship himself. But at the same time, I think it's also important that it helped train a new generation of student architects who would otherwise have no other way of training to be teachers. Because, I mean, unless you want to spend another 3 years working on an education degree. So it does make the workload larger as a whole, but I think it's really about flexibility on how to make different generations of teacher architects work together with each other in training the younger generation. Our classes used to be smaller, so they were just taught by the lecturers. So just to share one possibility.
Lecturing is the easiest for the professor. You only prepare the slides, and then if you've been teaching this for so long, you're still using the same slides. But engaging the students, it will take harder for the professor because you have to prepare the lessons, and then what do you need the students to learn, and then what activity will you give the students so that they will digest the knowledge that will be extracted from this activity. While it is good that you have an expert for one subject, but the attention span of students right now is, well, it's good that they're still here, they're still sitting down because of Architect Lichauco's comments, but technically 15-20 minutes tops. Their minds will go somewhere else. So that's the problem with lecturing in a class. So it's better if you have, the faculty will just be a moderator and then the students will put their input. But it will really take a lot of homework for the faculty, a lot of preparation.
Quick story. When I left UST, the mindset was I have to own my own firm, right? Therefore, you can only be a good architect if you own your own firm. When I got to the States and I started working in the US, I finally realized you can actually be a really good architect working in a firm, as long as it's a good firm. And that's basically what we modeled our firm for. And that's the same thing with your question on teaching and your question on whether the other teachers will get jealous or not. We do a lot of schools in our office, and schools have the highest level of internal politics. It's insanely political, right? And these are all the schools we've designed. These are all the schools we've seen. And sometimes meandering through the political minefield gets you into trouble. But at the same time, you understand that that's the nature of the thing, and it's something, to answer your question, is can we go beyond the politics? And that's basically why I said the first example of the firm was that sometimes you just have to realize that it doesn't have to be that way all the time. And maybe sometimes other teacher will say, yes, I'm not as good as that other teacher, and therefore I have to do this part of the work. But hopefully that other teacher also is not as mayabang as me, right? Or other people, right? And so it's other things that you have to kind of understand. I totally disagree though with Dean Chona saying lecture is easy, right? Lectures are so hard to do and they're expensive. Because every time I lecture, I spend a lot of money in chocolate because when you ask a question, I'll make you bato chocolate, right? And or M&Ms. Well, when I was richer, it was Toblerone, diba? But the thing is, it's hard because you're right. We have to capture your attention. We have to be engaging. Do you think this personality just happened when I woke up this morning? Yeah, it did. All right. But it doesn't, right? In other words, you kind of have to work, and you have to understand, lecturers, that's why lectures are hard. For you to be an effective lecturer, you got to work at it. Not just of what you say, but how you deliver, how do you engage, how do you make sure they're picking up the right things, right? And making sure you're an effective lecturer. So part is the content, and part of it's trying to understand the best way to deliver the message, right? Chalk not works, by the way.
I think there's a certain charm in having 40, 45 students in a class, especially for subjects like design. These are 45 creative students. Maybe you come up with 45 ideas, and then your classmates, they learn from each other. So I don't agree that you have to limit the number of students per class. I think it all boils down to the student, whether or not they're willing to learn.
I think they can go on to the same brief. It's just that in terms of contact hours, I still think a closer, like it's 12 to 1 is when one teacher really has time to review and understand what 12 students are thinking. I mean, there are also other professors that would just go for crits and that their tutors review their students' work weekly.
Dean Chona mentioned two very inspiring things which I think we can talk about. Teachers who use always the same slides, like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. This is of course about the elderly teachers because they have the previous slides. What should we do with those teachers who use always the same slides? And the second is 15-20 minutes, you have to keep the attention of the students. In fact, in practical teaching, you have to do a new action. For example, you do something, after that you have to ask a question, or you have to give an assignment, a task, so that they are always kept. But what should we do with those teachers who don't know how to educate, how to teach? Because they say, I'm an architect, I'm not a teacher. So should we employ you just because you are an architect and we need architecture teachers? So what should we do with those teachers who don't want to renew their knowledge, refresh their knowledge? What should we do with those teachers who don't want to learn how to teach, the rules of the teaching? Should we dismiss them or what should we do?
Can I just ask, most of you are students, right? Raise your hand, students? Okay, be honest and just tell the truth and raise your hand. You can cover your face with your hanky if you don't want to be identified because you're being videoed, right? How many here think that their teachers teach because they cannot practice? Raise your hand. Seriously, how many here? Do you have teachers think because they cannot practice? Just raise your hands and be honest. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Come on, that's it, right? Okay, 8, 9, 10. Brave souls. Thank you very much. See, one of the things that is difficult to answer your question is there is that image that people teach because their architecture careers are not successful, right? But you should also be able to understand that there are teachers who teach because they have to take care of the academic side of teaching. So not necessarily because they don't build, but they're better thinkers, right? And to answer that question, there's this mindset in most of the schools that I've seen is that students will not believe the academic non-building teachers and will actually have the teachers who actually build stuff are more credible, right? But what you have to understand is both are as important. And so to answer all your question on what do you do with teachers that do not change your slides, iPhone 10 with unlimited data. Right? Get them an iPhone 10 with unlimited data and tell them to change your slides. It's all over the net. You know, one of the pecan parts, when I took pictures for my lectures, I had 40 rolls of film, I had 2 cameras, I had lenses and everything, so I can get good pictures for the lectures, because I knew I was going to use those lectures for pictures. Now you can get it from the net. It's very different from experiencing it, but it's adequate for getting specific images that you want to share. And so for any teacher who refuses to change your slides, I think that's totally inexcusable because of the information that you can get from your phone.
In fairness to Architect Lichauco, when I first knew him in UST, I think you
Last
started
year.
teaching ahead of me.
Yeah, but
in
I'm younger, huh?
Yeah, sige na nga. He would go to Europe
And
just
taller.
to update his slides. Ganon. He would always take pictures, current pictures, and he would make sure that he's in the photo. Hindi pa Photoshop, because those were slides. But going back to what do we do with the teachers, when I was the chairman of the Committee on Education of UAP, I told the educators that that was a time when the masters is not yet required for faculty members. I told them that they must, anyone who is seriously thinking about their career in the academe should take up at least 9 units of education course. So what are those? Classroom management, how to prepare your exams, etc. Because the architects know, they have the knowledge, they know what to teach, but how to teach it effectively and how to impart it to the students effectively, that's the gap. So they need to be trained. And you know what the reaction of the deans to me? They said, it's hard to get faculty with master's degree, and now you're telling us that they should go back to school to learn how to teach. So, well, if that's their reaction, so what can we do?
Well, I actually have a more fundamental question to ask. Like, why, if the slides are working, why do we need to change the slides?
I think life is going on.
But the architecture, there are some. Yeah, it depends on the subject, right?
In every subject, for example, history of architecture, when this was built, it will never change because it has been built. But new research can find out that it was not built in that year. It was built by another teacher. In building technology, very obvious because we have new details what we did not know before. So that is very obvious. Even in, for example, library. How looked the library 20 years ago and how is it looking right now? The building typology is changing. So he has to refresh his knowledge.
Yeah, I can understand it as a larger question of reforms and keeping up to date, but I don't think it's the individual slides per se, but more the institutional framework of like how history and theory is or should be taught across the 5 years. Because like if you're teaching Baroque history, I don't see a very imminent need for them to change repeatedly.
In particular, in history of architecture, there are a lot of changes because the basic theoretical understanding is changing everywhere, and how we think about architecture today, we change our thinking about before. But the problem is what I want to say and that I want to bring up, lack of research. So research is today very much emphasized, the need for research. And our faculty members are not used to research. And in University of San Carlos, it's not an advertisement, just like this, that we have a very efficient research program. What happened before, the school leadership was just saying, you make research. Nobody made research. But then they provided a big budget for this. So they provided a budget, and if there is a research conference, those who come there the names are recorded, but also they get a good AM snacks, they get the lunch, and they get a good PM snacks. And then they invite people who are interesting, who are good speakers. So how could we encourage the research activity of our teachers? Because not refreshing the slides, the problem is because they don't make research, they don't know what is going on. So what are your suggestions? Research.
Read the news, perhaps. I don't know, because I feel like it's impossible for that single person to know the latest to research on the latest on his own, right? So it comes down to the teacher's responsibility to stay up ahead of the time, to actually know the body of research that's out there. So with respect to his own research, it might not even be so much related to what the students need to learn at that particular moment in time. So I think it's a much more complex question than it's much less one-to-one than to say that, oh, this is my research that I've been doing and this is what I will be teaching to the students.
It's not just by accident that they request a degree, because if you have a degree, you defended already something. You make publications. Even for masters, you need to make some publications, and for doctoral, you really need. So, because research is necessary. So, how to encourage research?
In the institutions, especially if you're applying for accreditation, research is one of the major areas that they are looking at. So if your school is not into research, then you get very low points. So in fact, that's why the top 4 schools are in the top because of research. For example, UP, for example, they encourage their faculty members to present a research outside of the country. So they look at partner schools where the faculty can present the research. So they are encouraged, not actually required, but encouraged, but actually it's a requirement for all the faculty to do a research. In other institutions where they do not have partnerships with other institutions outside of the country, in architecture, for example, we have the ACARE, we have the ARCARE, where you can do research and then present it. In fact, it's even harder to present in ARCARE than presenting abroad, because abroad, when you present your research, they don't really look at the content, etc. They will just look at, okay, it's a good topic, then you can present it. But in ACARE, they really look at it, hinihimay-himay nila yung research mo, so that it becomes an intellectual exercise for the faculty. So it was created, the ACARE was created for architectural researchers in the academe, simply because they wanted to fulfill this part in the accreditation so that there will be researchers in the academe. There are very few architects who would do research, honestly. There's only one school who is very good in research, and we know that school. But we are now opening, not your school. We are now opening up other schools wherein even the thesis of the students, we submit it to the research department, because honestly, the students have done a lot of research in their thesis. So we also submit it as their research. So Architect Lichauco will tell you that when he was teaching Design 9, this is how you do your book, right? He would let the students submit the e-file, and then he will look, plagiarism finder, and then he will tell you who plagiarized. So
You check it, $500 a year. It's a program.
Turn it on.
Yeah, it's called You Check It. You send the electronics of the paperwork, and it'll tell you percentage plagiarized.
So we also have, I think it's called Turn It On. But how do you penalize if they plagiarize? Because what happened in San Carlos was really strange, because in the fine arts department, the teacher was very strict that no plagiarism. And then then in the school handbook it is that you have to dismiss the student. Now, these fine arts teachers, imagine artists who think they are very free, so we have to dismiss the students. But then the other teachers got afraid because so many other students also plagiarize, so we have to dismiss the whole department. So what would you do really if you see plagiarism in your school?
Well, one, I think you're right. It's very hard to. Well, okay, this is a big picture. When you go to a society where you have senators writing their speeches that are blatantly plagiarized, Soto, right? When you see people actually doing the same thing and say, how can we do the same thing, right? So it starts from there, and it's actually changing. But I think once you tell the students, I have this checking program that's really expensive, and if you get one, you'll be disbarred, then it minimizes. A lot of it is saying, we have the means to check it now. Now the last one is simply like, it's called God is watching. It's called karma, right? And so one of the things you just understand is, yes, if you decide to plagiarize, you're fooling yourself, and down the line it's going to catch up to you.
But is the school not providing you the program? So you're saying it's expensive program, so the school is not giving you?
And you
Because
doesn't.
in our school, we are given by the school so that to check. Actually, those who are teaching in the graduate school, they have this program.
Yeah, the Turn It On, I think it's freeware. Or,
We pay.
yeah. And you has
and then the school has, according to access, we have to pay, and it shows how much percentage is really plagiarized.
yes.
It's very, very dramatic sometimes because you thought this is a super student, and it turns out this is just a liar, no?
Well, one time I sent it, it's called, I use You Check It, right? And it came back and go 100% original because the student's writing was so bad, I don't think the computer understood what he wrote.
But actually the computer also checks the alternative words. For example, you can say and or respectively, and but what more important is, I would like to ask you how a teacher can get refresh their own knowledge. I think for that international contacts are very important because we get exchange teachers, we send students to exchange to other countries. May I ask you what are the practices you know about international linkages in order to elevate the level of architecture education? We can ask all the participants in your countries, your place, what are the linkages, what is the role of international contacts in updating architecture education?
Well, on one level, our teachers are coming from different international places. So we have teachers from England, the States, and China as well. So we have on the hiring of the teachers, we do have a strong or a very all-rounded.
How much do those teachers earn? I think it's a secret.
I don't know. You have to ask.
It's a secret. But I think the payment has also something in it because you can attract people who we would not be able to attract.
That's true. So the other level, which was what we were talking about just now, is about the curriculum calendar that is not synchronized with the international pace. That it's becoming a little bit difficult for your students to go abroad to partake on exchange tours or other courses. Because like for HKU, we run on somewhat like a September to May semester calendar, so I think it is easier for our students to try to go abroad in whether it's for exchange or for their master's higher level studies. It's been easier to do that.
I believe being easy or difficult is not an excuse because even if it is difficult, you have to do it. What about in Norway? Your school has international contacts in other countries. Are there students from other countries coming to you? Do you have the opportunity to go to other countries to study?
Education is free in Norway, so yes, we have students coming from abroad. But in terms of teachers, no mostly Norwegians. Well, AEA has very international teacher staff, and in terms of staying up to date, the teachers are hired on a yearly basis, and based on the interest of to go into that unit, they would be extended or not. So it's technically an
Is it possible for students of your university to go abroad and for an exchange program to study, for example, in Spain, semester? Is it possible?
So there are exchange programs within Europe that works well.
Yeah. So how many students are participating in this? Many or rather few?
I think most students would at least go up for half a year or maybe a year.
You're saying most of the students, because it's very different from here. Because we have in some countries, we have some countries with Hungary, with Netherlands, and we are now building up Japan, so that we send students there. But the problem here is those who can afford. But
So we have the economic support to send students now.
yeah, the good thing is that we have also rich students who can afford. But so
No,
they
but the
have
government
to.
provides.
In your case, it's different because, but here in the Philippines, we try to do our best.
Yeah, I was really lucky. Early on, my grad school education was an exchange program. My father exchanged pesos for dollars. So, in other words, we're lucky, right? Because he was able to send me to school. But you're right. One of the things is a lot of the things, like in USC, there's this. Who's from USC? There's a summer thing, right? That you're going to Barcelona. No, where are you going? Madrid. Ubisa, right? You're just going. Where? UBC. Oh, you're going to Canada. No, there's another one in Europe, right? So what happens is, but the sad part is all the different teachers are setting up the programs and there's no institutional kind of development, right? Or even a pool for all the college students or the college deans being to share the resources.
How many students?
I think for the one in Europe, 14, right? And then the one in Canada, 372. The Locola, 5 or 2, I don't know, right? So, it's all there. Palakpakan guys. 3 guys are going to Canada. Yay! Okay.
Because this is a very good chance to learn something also that you haven't. You have a new ambition to study. Who of you have you been in Canada or in Spain? Yeah, could you tell your experience?
I actually haven't been there to study architecture, but I'm very excited to go this year because UST actually offered an exchange program for architecture students and other students from other colleges also to go to different countries to study. And yeah, I just want to ask, what do you guys think about the relevance of travel in architecture, especially when it comes to studying abroad?
Every March, there's a travel sale in Mega Mall. Go. Right? You get cheap tickets. Again, it's experiencing a lot of things. In the olden times, when you finished architecture school, your parents sent you to the Grand Tour. I don't know if you remember that, where they gave you money to tour Europe for a year. Right? That was in the 1940s and the 1950s. It was called the Grand Tour, right? So, but then it really allowed them to understand that whenever you travel, it actually allows you to learn more things. Let me just give you an example. The Philippines is very US biased, right? We like Americans, right? They're our pals. Okay. So the biggest thing I learned when I studied in the States and studied in Europe, was that I realized exactly how young a nation the US was, right? And all they did was big. It was only big and loud and fast, right? But when you look at everything else and the history and the tradition of Europe, I said the Philippines has a longer, deeper history than the Americans do. But then why don't we pay attention to that history as much as the Europeans? And it's only traveling from the US to Europe, back to Manila to different parts of Asia, and you show that we are actually an older nation than the US. So therefore, what can we do to learn from that?
There is also one more aspect, the international accreditation. If you I don't know if you are aware of that there is such thing as Canberra Accord. Canberra Accord is all the developed countries, starting from Japan, Korea, Taiwan, Australia, South African Republic, Mexico, US, Canada. They are under the Canberra Accord in architecture. And Canberra Accord, you can be accredited through Canberra Accord. For that, there must be an accreditation board. And there are 4 universities. This is UP Diliman, this is Mapua, this is Far Eastern University and University of San Carlos. They started the initiative to be accredited through that. And then UST started an initiative to go to be accredited through the Americans. And this would be very good because if you go to Australia, you go to US, you show your diploma, and they don't ask anymore. They say, you are from this, then you are okay, like the locals. So this is a big question we were discussing with the students, how much we should invest, because accreditation is very expensive. So they come here, you have to pay. They make their studies, you have to pay. Even if you fail, you have to pay. And then if they give the accreditation, you have to pay. But finally, it's a big good for the students. No, when we invited the Korean accreditation board to Cebu, and first they came just for informative. The second time they came not to check, because they said if you fail, it would be a lot of money. If you don't fail, you have also to pay. So there is in Korea, there is a foundation that gives a month to visit developing countries. So they came with this. And then they noticed problems. For example, the credits. I think 232 credits are required by the CHED, and then San Carlos has 245. So we thought we will be praised, but instead the Koreans scolded us because they said, you have too many credits. They have only 180, and they said, you should not have so many credits because you are teaching too many subjects in a very superficial way. You should teach less subjects but in a deeper way. Now what should I do? If I reduce it to 180, maybe I can be accredited by them but not by the CHED. So what will happen if otherwise I will be accredited by the local but not by the international? So this is the understanding of international education. And there are other institutions in Cebu, they say, let's not bother the international accreditation. We were surviving until now, but it's very lucrative actually that you have a diploma, you go there, and then you are equivalent to the others. So what is your opinion to this? In particular, Chona, what do you think about this, that should we make schools efforts, even very expensive efforts, for international accreditation? Because the Canberra Accord would be really relevant. Just it takes so much time and so much effort, and if I say the students that the Canberra Accord accreditors request a half class size, because that's the 20 students. So I reduced to 20, the tuition fee will be twice so much. So will the students will still enroll in this university or not? Because I can say that maybe not even you will be the one whose degree will be accredited, but the next. So what is your opinion? Also from the point of academe, but also from the practicing architects. What do you think? Is this really a big value to be accredited, or should we rather live peaceful?
Okay. I'm also a Pakukowa accreditor. So, accreditation is voluntary. So, you may or you may not ask your school administrators to undergo accreditation. But, for the international accreditation, okay, this is my experience when I was still in UST. We will have students who are now, at the time, they were already living in Canada, and they said that their diploma in UST is not accepted because of so and so. But if we get accreditation, international accreditation, then we will be at par with the other schools. We are now sharing the same standard, which we do not get if we are not internationally accredited. So there are other areas like Saudi Arabia, I think, is also strict about the curriculum, Philippine curriculum. So they're not crediting the diploma of graduates from the Philippines, I think, or there are only certain schools. And I think even before kahit nga UP and Siliman, they do not accept the diploma from. There are some countries that do not accept the diploma from these universities. But if you are accredited internationally, then remember that we are now opening our gates to APEC, ASEAN because of the GATS, right? So we will be competing with the other countries. If you do not get international accreditation, how can you now guarantee your students, for example, your graduates, they would like to study in Hong Kong? Because remember that you will be, they're talking about the portability of your credentials. Will they accept your credentials if your school is not internationally accredited and then you went to a school that is accredited? So that's the benefit of having international accreditation, but it's really very, very expensive. And I don't think, and I think there will only be about 2-3 schools who can actually do that. Kami for NU, I know we can't because our tuition fee is only less than half of the tuition fee of UST. So I don't think we can afford that.
But what is going on with Canberra Accord? They accredit the Philippines to create an accreditation board. Those schools who initiated, they will be in that board, but they can accredit others. Now, it's a big question, why should our school, invest so much money in this from that the others will benefit? No, because we create the Philippine Accreditation Board. Okay, the members will be from those schools which initiated. These 4 or 5 schools, together with UST also. But then finally, other schools might be also accredited by this. So this is really a big question.
In fact, UNESCO and UIA has formulated the architecture education program, and then they also agree that there should be an accreditation. And if the local organization, like UAP for example, being the accredited professional organization, can create its own accreditation body. But is UAP skilled to do that? So there
actually, it's not. It's in Canberra Accord. It's not the role of UAP, but role of the schools. But so I just brought this up because this is a very important question. But architecture.
Well, because I think a few years ago when I was still a master's student, we had this question about whether our school should be accredited to a RIBA. So we used to be accredited to the UK system in addition to the Hong Kong system, but because of expenses, our faculty thought it might not be it did not make that much sense to them. But then it created as well much opinion from the students themselves that hey, why are you ripping me of my rights to go to UK to practice? So I think it's not even I don't think it's even a question of what the institute is thinking. I think it's a question that is best raised up by the students, because the students are the ones who wants to go somewhere, and unless you're saying like it's really to understand where the students want to go, because with that you can be more specific with what institutes to negotiate with accreditation.
So let's check. Who are students? Raise your hands. Those who are architecture students here, raise their hands. Okay. Next is, please raise your hand if you are ready to support your school's accreditation program if your tuition fee will be increased to the double. So So we'll have to pay twice so much. Raise your hand if you would think. Because your diploma will be then internationally relevant. Could you raise your hands? So, still I think it's maybe 1/4, but it's good to hear. It's closing this long, but I think very interesting discussion. I enjoyed very much. I hope you also. May I ask each member of the panel, what are your expectations to 2018? Because 2018 is when the schools will have again first year. Just for the foreign panelists, right now it is so that we are making an education transition to the education. Last year we had no first year, this year we will have no first year and second year because the students in the high school, they continue. And 2018 we will have students in our school who are 18 years old, so actually really adults starting. And then we also heard from the government that schools which are not performing, they will be disqualified. So those where the board performance is very low, they will be disqualified. So they will be not anymore universities but colleges or professional institutes. So very big changes are promised. So may I ask, starting with Architect Ng, what are your expectations to 2018 in terms of architecture education?
Right now, I have no personal experience, but from what I heard, the transition hasn't been very good. That the junior high school program isn't really ironed out. But there's no clear-cut curriculum. So when they started this K-12 program, many schools were at a loss, and then some were offering specific subjects for
we know
courses.
this all because it's difficult, but if it would everything go as we hope, what are your expectations to this, if everything would be successful?
Of course, we hope that we would have more dynamic and dynamic students or graduates who are more enthusiastic and who will be more ready to join the workforce. Would be good architects.
Are you not afraid that the best graduates will go abroad and not to your company to support you?
Well, I think the...
Sorry for the provocative question, but I have to ask.
I think the good students will go abroad, but the best will stay here.
Thank you.
The problem with the 2018 curriculum, CHED still has not released our curriculum, the new curriculum, and they have not considered in the draft, which I read, they still have not considered the K11 and 12. Thus, there are no deductions in the GE subjects. And then I think Filipino, which is now 6 units, will become 9 units in college. So there will be a lot of changes. Regarding our students leaving the country, when I was still in Palafox, the students will come to Palafox, take the board exams, and then after passing the board exam, they will leave the country. So you will see the age gap. So there's very young and then not so young architects in the office because the middle people will leave and then work abroad, and then hopefully they will get their career, a good career outside of the country. But right now, since we have so many construction in the Philippines compared to the other countries, I hope that we can give more jobs to our graduates when that time comes.
They are positive about the change.
In the office, it's not really a stat, no, but we lose people to go abroad. We very seldom lose people to another local firm. Okay, it's either they will leave because they'll set up, or they will their own, or they will leave because they go abroad. And the going abroad thing is actually a big
But
problem.
2018, what are your expectations?
Yeah, and to get there to 2018, hopefully what will happen is as the industry matures, because we have, according to Duterte, how many trillions of work coming in and stuff like that, right? I'm just saying is as the maturity it matures and as the people learn that we can actually do things here, then we'll be hopefully getting students that are more exposed to international type work that is locally available, and so therefore with the new K to 12, that will actually make the students a lot better. I'm very optimistic.
As teacher, do you think there will be in your when your students will be older?
Okay.
Will
Not really, because the schools we teach are teaching, they actually have the old K to 12. They were already K to 12 before K to 12. So I don't think I'll see a major shift in UST, but I think I'll see a bigger shift in NU, right? Because the NU students naman are the ones with the full K to 12.
Maybe to the two foreign panelists, maybe we can ask, what do you think about Philippine architecture education? Closing question. We would like to hear your feedback.
I can say that I don't know very much how your education is like, but I do see a lot of really good architects. I'm sure it's quite alright. I think there's a lot of stuff there that's really, really fantastically interesting. Architectural history, culture, social context. So, there's a whole world to engaging. It's probably fantastic. But I don't know what you're actually doing.
Well, I feel that, at least from this is also my first time here, so from what I can understand, I feel that you guys have more enthusiasm in a way in architecture that perhaps even I as a student didn't have so much. So I really appreciate that level of passion towards a certain subject, which I hope that through these years that you will keep and be able to maintain that, because it's the most important thing that keeps you going forward, I would say.
So my closing remark is that I had always in the mind what Dean Chona said, that 15-20 minutes you can keep the attention of the people, but after that no more hope. But I am happy to see that 2 hours we were sitting here and most of you were attentive. So let's give ourselves a big applause and thank you.
Thank you very much, Father Bela Lanyi. Thank you very much to our panelists.